What would cause an engine to break the front off the crank before all the rod journals? Well, I can't answer that specifically, but what I can do is help you identify why your crank broke just based on the way that it broke. Okay, so most bearing failures, like when you spin a bearing, the telltale sign that that's what happened to you is the crank will break right here where the fillet is. These will stay intact, or this will stay intact, and it will just rip apart. Usually this thing itself will break and you'll be left with two pieces, but this will still be intact, this will still be intact, but this whole chunk here will have been removed. I'm assuming that that's similar to what happened to the guy in this comment. That could happen anywhere along here, of course, but usually if you have a break like that where this section actually separates instead of this snapping, you know, cracking either this way or something like that, it's because it's a spun rod was the main cause. Okay, the way you figure out if your crankshaft broke from torsional fatigue, which would be something like a dampener failing or a weak spot on the crank, or maybe your clutch pushing up against it, or just whatever's causing a torsional stress on it, is you're going to see a break actually in the journal itself, and it's going to always go through, almost always go through your oiler port here, and it will crack at a 45 degree, almost without exception. So if your dampener caused the failure, then you're going to break here at a 45 degree rather than snap off like I was telling you is the case on a spun bearing. Last but not least, if your crank failed from longitudinal stress, the break is going to be different than those other two brakes, quite a bit different. It won't necessarily follow the rule of braking on the hole, and you will brake at a straight 45 and straight, and that could be pretty massive across here, but it's pretty distinct from your other type of brakes that will usually be an exact 45 coming right across your oiler hole. Your longitudinal brakes will go straight 45 and straight, and they can brake anywhere along the span. Okay, longitudinal brakes are most common from defects in the crank itself, or in the line bore, or if you sent the crank out, you have a crank that's been remachined and all that, and you end up with a brake like that, a longitudinal stress brake, then you can blame it on the crank itself. So that's how you identify the three different ways that your crank breaks and try and figure out why it happened.